Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Paul Hewitt. I'm VP of Sales for UK and Ireland for Visure. And we're running a webinar today on the subject of business benefits of effective requirements management. And this is a report that actually I developed initially about 18 years ago, but since then I've updated it and modified the information and added to it. And I did actually go through an exercise during that time of trying to quantify the benefits which actually come out in the report that I've written. And these are based on actual feedback that I've had from customers who have used the requirements tool to support requirements management. So just a couple of bits of administration before we start. I will go through the presentation, and if you've got any questions you want to raise or ideas or thoughts that come into your mind during the presentation, if I could ask you to raise your questions on the in the question panel where you can type in the questions, and what we'll aim to do is answer those questions at the end of the session. So there should be time, probably 10 or 15 minutes, hopefully, at the end of the question to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, I will start the presentation. So let's go through, first of all, the agenda for today. If I can get my might move to the agenda. Right. So my agenda for today is, well, first of all, what is requirements management? And I've actually done some research on the diary definition of requirements management. So I'll cover that in a minute. And then I want to talk about what do we mean by business benefits. And I want to give you some context on where I see business benefits, or where we see business benefits of the introduction of effective requirements management. And then we move into the areas where you can actually gain cost savings. And the cost savings, I've really identified the primary headings on areas where you would expect to see and where customers have actually witnessed and quantified actual cost savings. And this comes in areas of real-time access to project information, system requirements, reuse, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail in a minute, requirements traceability, information version management, the ability to produce traceability matrices in real time, test planning, risk management, engineering report production, and production of the contract deliverable specification documents. And then there's one I've highlighted at the bottom there, is capturing and maintaining your intellectual property. And that one for me is a particularly interesting one, and I've got an example of some recent customer activity where this was an issue. And then we look at finally the cost justification for effective requirements management, and we'll wrap that up with some conclusions. So I'll start with a Dilbert, which I'll let you read. Some of you may have already seen this particular cartoon, but it's for me very relevant to the discussion that I'm running today. So what is requirements management? Well, let's look at, first of all, the diary definition of requirements management. So requirements management is the process of documenting, analyzing, tracing, and prioritizing and agreeing on requirements, and then controlling change and communicating to relevant stakeholders. That's one view of requirements management. It is a process that continues throughout the project. It doesn't happen just at the beginning or the middle or the end. It's something that ideally should live with the project so that you end up with a documented account of the as delivered system rather than the as specified system. It's a requirement is a capability to which a project outcome, which is a product or a service, should conform. The purpose of requirements management is to ensure that an organization documents, verifies, and meets the needs and expectations of its customers and internal or external stakeholders. Requirements management involves communication between the project team members and the stakeholders. And finally, the traceability between requirements is used in managing requirements to report back fulfillment of company and stakeholder interests in terms of compliance, completeness, coverage, and consistency. So let's go on to where I see requirements management historically from projects that I've personally been involved with and from projects that I've been involved with or had customer involvement with more recently. So typically an awful lot of requirements management happens, much is shown in the picture here. It's in Word documents, Excel, it's minutes of meetings. Nowadays it's social media, it's Twitter. It could even be notes on bits of paper. But from my own experience of late, requirements management can very often happen in the canteen or that lunchtime discussion where you meet one of your colleagues and you discover some revelation about something on the project that you both happen to be working on. So that's the real world of project of requirements management. What we're trying to do though, and I see these as what I've defined here as islands of information, autonomous islands of information, which aren't particularly wired together. Now, to take this into what I term requirements management, it's how do I bring what I call chaos into order. So going forward, it's about taking this information and then connecting it up, linking information together, not at document level, but at individual statement level within the documents. So it's this chaos to order. So we link autonomous bits of information together and create order out of that linking. So let's move on to think about, well, what are the business benefits? Make no mistake, to move from the top part of this slide to the bottom part of this slide does require investment. It requires intellectual investment in making the effort to actually start to bring this information into an ordered form and to start linking that information together. But the payback, which hopefully you'll see during this presentation, is very clear. So what are the business benefits? So I'll start here by looking at, we are looking at business benefits in terms of time saving, efficiency, productivity improvement, quality, collaboration, actually establishing an environment where you collaborate and share information, which in turn brings cost savings, completeness, and the one I'm going to cover at the end of the presentation, capturing IP, capturing your intellectual property, and moving it out of the heads of the people within your organization and creating out of that information an asset which lives within the organization and lives for next generations of your products and services. And in doing all of the above, the side benefit you get out of it is customer satisfaction, a real understanding on their part that they've asked for something or they've created a specification of what they're looking for, and they have a one-to-one correlation that says this is what we've asked for and this is what you then prove you can deliver. So areas where I can see business benefits, some of the primary headings are in areas like requirements reuse, requirements traceability, production of traceability matrices, test planning, ad hoc production of management metrics and reports, and automated production of contract deliverable documents. And some of the savings that have been both measured and recorded against some of these areas are shown here. On requirements reuse 25%, requirements traceability 90%. Now, these seem like big savings, and the way I actually measured some of this information is by going back around customers and talking to them. Now, of course, a lot of people won't give this information up willingly. It's regarded as their own intellectual property or their own competitive advantage. So the way we actually developed this information was in a very iterative way, by going back to customers and say, did you see this level of saving? And of course, they're not going to tell you outright, but what I discovered is when I got the least line of resistance, when I got to the point where they said, that is absolutely, where they didn't say, this is ridiculous, your estimate is way over the top, that then gave me the basis of this information. So moving on, so I'll actually reinforce some of these percentages as we go through the presentation. So one of the areas not covered there, and I haven't quantified it because in discussion with people it's very difficult to quantify, but it's about real-time access to information, capturing one instance and version of project information in one integrated repository, and making this information available to everyone that needs it within the project. This promotes significant productivity and quality improvement. It saves time, particularly when introducing new people into a project. So one of the most daunting tasks faced by any engineer taking on an existing project is finding out just where the information exists. This can often be time-wasting and time-consuming and counterproductive activity, even for the most seasoned and capable system and project engineers. We can significantly simplify this process by making all the relevant engineering information available in a single integrated central database that can be accessed by everyone within the project who needs to access it. Again, difficult to quantify the benefit here, but make no mistake, the benefit is real. So the next one I want to go on to is system requirements reuse. And this represents, particularly at the early stages of a project, can represent 25% in time savings to be able to easily access and reuse requirements, and their associated verification criteria achieve significant productivity improvements on new projects. Increasingly, organizations are looking more towards large-scale reuse as a way of improving productivity, raising quality, and reducing project delivery timescales. It is recognized, however, that this can only be achieved through the introduction of systems engineering best practice, rather than ad hoc reuse of data in project archives. Planning for reuse needs to happen during the early stages of the project and captured in a central repository in the form which is easily accessible by the project engineers. Capturing this reusable data in bounded Microsoft Word or Excel documents is often not good enough to promote and encourage effective reuse of information. Effective and flexible reuse needs to occur at individual requirement statement or item level rather than a whole document level. Capturing reusable artifacts in Visure requirements, for instance, allows this reuse to be managed and controlled at individual requirement statement level, and because it is captured in a central repository, this information is available to the whole project team. Industrial case studies have actually been completed in an aircraft engine control domain. This was actually derived from a customer actually in the USA, where reuse of common platform data and international standards information has been successfully captured and reused on the next generation system. This provided a solid and consistent foundation on which to start the new project, where compliance with known and stable information could be reused. The effective reuse of this data increased quality and consistency between projects and helped to ensure that unnecessary omissions could be avoided. At the start of new projects, the cost and time savings of effective information reuse were found to be significant, and over the life of the whole project activities associated with reuse of standards and common platform information represented savings in time and effort of about 25%. One study concluded that reuse allows organizations to use personnel more effectively because it leverages expertise and moves the focus to the new customer requirements rather than the ones already covered by the common platform and the customer specified standards. So significant savings on the area of reuse. So the next area for savings is in the area of requirements traceability. And here, again with customer feedback, we identified savings of actually up to 90% in time savings. This is to quickly identify what is touched by any requirements change in one document and how it impacts requirements across other associated project documents. Now this is quite important as very often during the project we all have to accept that change happens. It happens for a number of reasons, technology shortfalls or technology limitations of what we're trying to achieve. Increasingly, organizations are looking more towards so engineers typically maintain traceability information independent of actual requirements and design data, either in the form of a spreadsheet, a simple database, or even on paper using a manual process. This information may take from several minutes to several hours to identify for each entity being traced. If the engineer must also refer to the baseline specifications in addition to the raw engineering data, this trace activity can even be more protracted. By using a shared requirements repository like Visure, the project is assured of automatic traceability once the data is entered and the appropriate relationships are established. Consider the following example. The project manager asks the system engineer to ascertain the impact of changing a particular requirement or system performance item. Done manually, this is usually a very time-consuming and tedious task, involving document searches and possibly meetings with people no longer involved with the project. Visure requirements ability to capture project history and the rationales for design decisions, coupled with its extensive traceability capabilities, makes this kind of query a simple byproduct of the capturing and linking requirements in the database. And this provides you with real-time information about the potential impact of change and what is potentially touched by that change. And that information could span multiple documents that are used within the project. Information version management. Notice here I haven't identified a time saving because in discussion with lots of customers this was very difficult for them to quantify. They can often have guesses, but not with sufficient confidence that they could actually quantify this. But working on out-of-date information can consume unnecessary time and effort, which can so easily be avoided. Maintain one instance and one version of the truth in a central requirements repository. The other challenge that many projects faced was ensuring that everyone who is working on the project is working on the correct version of project information. As I said before, maintaining one instance and one version of the project data in the central repository, which everyone in the project team can access, significantly improves the quality and consistency of the resulting project deliverables. Also, maintaining a record of who changed what and when, which individual requirement statements and when they were changed provides useful history and context of why changes occurred in the first place. And this context, by the way, is often lost through the time of a project management activity or the project lifecycle. It also allows projects to monitor and assess requirement volatility, which for information held in Visure requirements can be reported on at any time. Requirements which are subject to a lot of change over time could be the subject of other underlying issues that need to be analyzed and resolved at source rather than perpetuated into future projects or product variants. Metrics and cost savings motivated by effective version management have been more difficult for organizations to assess and quantify. But our customers have absolutely confirmed that the business benefit is real. Historically, version management has been performed at document level rather than individual requirement statement level, which increases the management and control of these documents and the effective recording of these changes. So moving on to the next one is production of traceability matrices or traceability matrix production. Now this one's a big one because we've identified this can represent savings up to 99%, and I'll actually expand on that, why it's such a high percentage saving. This is to ensure compliance with standards, regulations and contracted customer requirements. It is vital that traceability matrices and reports can be quickly produced at any time and in real time. Project managers frequently request traceability matrices as the program evolves, especially for major reviews and milestones. Another reason that traceability matrices are created is to document system compliance with the standards, with the regulations, and with the customer's original statement of need. Typically, this matrix is produced by manually compiling diverse engineering information during the latter design phases of a program as a prelude to system integration and test activities. For a moderate-sized system database containing, say, 1,000 requirements, which very often is matched in equal number by the number of functions and or components to which the functions have been allocated, this matrix may take from 50 to 100 staff hours to compile and publish. Using Visure requirements, a single engineer can effortlessly produce traceability reports and matrices in a fraction of the time spent producing this information manually. And on the slide here you can see examples. This is simple as examples of traceability matrices that can be produced in Visure, where the blue arrows showing the link between requirements in two different documents in this case show where requirements have been linked with no requirements, with no changes. Where the arrows are shown here in red, that actually shows what we call a suspect link, where a change has occurred on one end of that link since this information was last compiled. Obviously, you can see here one views in the database. This information can very simply be exported out to an Excel spreadsheet to actually share this information as part of a design or project review. And another way of looking at this same information is through the document view, where you can see traceability, in this case between user requirements, system requirements, subsystem requirements, and actually into test and verification, all in one view. And you can very quickly assess here what user requirements trace to system requirements, but more importantly, what user requirements don't actually trace to anything yet. You know, is that missing information? Is that part of the system design that has not been fulfilled? And this is very useful information for project managers who need to track progress of the project at any time in real time. So the next area to look at is test planning. And in test planning, we've represented or identified savings up to 60% in linking requirements with test cases. So ensuring that every requirement is measurable and testable and directly links to a test or validation criteria which can automatically be issued as a report will improve quality and save time. And this for me is a very important aspect, because if you're writing the requirements or you're creating requirements initially, if the information you are creating, if it's not measurable, if it's not testable, we have to bid the question, is it a requirement at all? And that really is important, because every single requirement in some way must make a contribution to what the system is supposed to do. Where requirements cannot be measured and cannot be tested, then I have to bid the question, are they requirements, or is it information which has been provided for the purpose of just providing additional information? And I've made the comment on the slide here, no test planning equals planning to fail. Traditionally, test planning has been accommodated as part of the system engineering process and passed to the test team or the test organization through requirements traceability matrices and reports. Since Visure requirements automates the generation of these reports, the needs of test planners can be easily met. More importantly, Visure requirements can easily be extended to explicitly accommodate test plans, procedures, and criteria within the Visure requirements data repository, thus encouraging early substantive participation of the integration and test team in the requirements analysis, design, and specification process. And it also makes you think that at the point of defining and writing your system requirements, that we should actively encourage people to think at the very instant they're writing the requirements, are they measurable? Are they testable? I can assure you this saves considerable time downstream when you're trying to validate and verify that those requirements are real and contribute to the system design. It is estimated that time savings are about 60% in using a tool to support this and accomplish the test planning and to publish the collateral test planning, including developing the appropriate report templates, is the norm. This significant saving is achieved because the reuse of the verification criteria associated with the reuse of the requirements, standards, and common system and product requirements can be taken into the next generation of project and product. The production of test specification documents is no longer a separate exercise which runs in parallel with the design activities. The test specification documents are automatically produced from the Visure requirements database with data that is supplied from an integral part of the design process. So the next area I want to talk about is risk management. And again, this is one, it's very difficult. I've put in question marks against time savings because again, in talking to customers, it's very difficult to quantify the time saving associated with risk management of the project. So one thing we do know though is that risk can be motivated by requirements from any part of the project and from any document or information held within the project. Linking risks and risk mitigation information should be an integral part of the project management process, which can be centralized and made visible to all, or at least those that need to see it. Project risk can also be recorded and maintained within Visure requirements. Where risk can be motivated by requirements, so where risk can be motivated by requirements from any project document and activities, identified risk can also be linked to risk mitigation information, which everyone within the project can have visibility of. So risk management becomes a truly integral part of the project management process, which everyone in theory should contribute to, and which can be controlled throughout the project management lifecycle. Risk management reports can be produced at any time during the project on demand. So identifying risk in the first place is important. Linking that information to risk mitigation is also important, and you can actually create traceability from the identified risks to how you're going to mitigate against those risks. And in some instances there is benefit of actually sharing some of those identified risks with your customers, particularly if it's come in from requirements that have come in from your customers, and by the way, even changes that may have come in from the customers. Identification, again, this is back to this, identifying the impact of change, and that will motivate, in some instances, risks to the costs to the project or the timescales to the project, or even the resources that may be demanded of that project. Having an open discussion with on these items can stop issues and conflicts later on in the project. So the next area for time and cost savings is in the area of engineering report production. So to automatically produce up-to-date and consistent information on project status and project metrics, which when produced manually consumes unnecessary time and effort. There are many instances where a project engineer is tasked with producing a report or metrics for internal peer or management review. Now, I've been here myself, to be quite honest, where just before an important management meeting you get a request for we need information about how many of the customer requirements have been satisfied, how many of the customer requirements linked to the product or system engineering requirements, or how many of the system engineering requirements have been linked to tests or verification criteria. And further downstream again, how many of the tests have been undertaken and how many of the tests have been passed or failed. So these are all information that if you've actually started to develop this information in a requirements database can be instantly accessible in real time. So there are many instances where project engineers test with producing these reports. This generally involves the tedium of extracting the relevant information from various sources, organizing it, and then arranging for professionally appealing production of the document, normally in some sort of spreadsheet or bar chart or pie chart or whatever. Usually by the time the document reaches its target audience, there are inevitably going to be inconsistencies because the information will be out of date or incorrect information by the time it gets presented. The problem often stems from the gap between the engineering data and the production of the document. This gap can be eliminated when you actually capture this information in Visure or the requirements database. There are numerous engineering reports from Visure requirements which can be produced at any time in real time during the requirements analysis and requirements development phases, covering functional design or functional allocation phases. These ad hoc reports are frequently demanded by either the customer, the project manager, or senior management, and can and often cause significant interruption. That's being kind. I've actually said disruption to project activities when they are requested. Our customers agree that the ability to produce these reports on demand out of the Visure requirements database is a great time and cost saver. It is estimated in general that the savings of up to 20% on system engineering staff can be accrued during the life cycle of the project. So another type of document I want to talk about in terms of production is the production of the final contract deliverable specification information. To automatically produce up-to-date and consistent information on the project status, on the project status, when produced manually, consumes unnecessary time. To avoid consuming valuable engineering resource for the production of the customer specification documents could be automated as an output from the tool itself. And this often again happens at the end of the project. And this also plays to the view that we need to maintain a documented view of the as delivered system, not the as specified system. The as specified system is the thing that happens at the beginning of the project, and as I've already mentioned, during the project change happens, and we need to manage that change in an environment, in a shared repository, in a single view of that information truth. And when we produce documents, those documents need to reflect those changes, which therefore reflect the final as delivered system, not the originally specified system. Now, the other area of introducing a tool is what I've termed process-driven requirements engineering. And this aims to establish repeatable processes for managing requirements across projects and provides an opportunity for measured improvements and information reuse. And by the way, it's important that everyone working on a project has this view of the project information. This encapsulates the way that the documents that are involved in the project, the links or the traceability that you've established between these documents. And this actually forms, by the way, the foundation of the process that you want to follow on this project. It also provides the foundation for the process or the information architecture that you want to maybe follow on future projects. And if you actually have this as a repeatable asset, then as you move into the next projects and the projects beyond, you can think about process improvement or improvement of the information. Notice actually here I've actually missed off risk analysis. Well, of course, risk can be linked to any of those blocks or any of those documents defined in this process. So establishing repeatable processes for managing requirements across projects provides opportunity for measured improvements and information reuse. And then the final one, this one's a difficult one. Again, I can't estimate time saving. Capturing and maintaining your intellectual property. This is a difficult one. It's a bit like an insurance policy. Experts leave organizations all the time. And the question is, have you captured the IP, the intellectual property that you have paid them for, that you have paid them to develop? Capturing and maintaining intellectual property is vital to the continued success of all organizations, ensuring it is captured before it walks. And I was having recent conversations with customers where one of their chief engineers made a decision to leave, and on occasions actually people haven't even have the audacity to want to retire, and in that retirement they walk out of the building with a lot of intellectual property which is rather neatly contained within the grey matter that sits in the top of their head. But of course that doesn't help you when you need to carry on your business and carry on developing and creating new versions of your products and services. So it's important that we find a mechanism of actually capturing this information, this intellectual property, in a way which is then becomes an asset of the business rather than something that is just locked and contained in people's heads. So I call this, if you like, an insurance policy. And there was one company I was talking to where they would create one version of the product and they would go down to the shop floor, the manufacturing environment, and say when they're talking about the new generation of the product or the next generation of the product, they would say, well, we want one that looks just like that one, but we're going to add these bits onto it. And that could be a conversation or it could be a scrap of paper. And I know it sounds unbelievable, but you know this happens. So we have to find ways of capturing this information by using a formal requirements management process supported by a requirements management tool to capture this information in real time as it's produced, means that you retain this intellectual property within your business. So this is an important one. Again, it's difficult to put a time saving on this information because it's something you only realize when the intellectual property has already walked, and the cost of trying to reproduce that information retrospectively can be very high. So let's look at the conclusions. And apologies for the busy slide, but it just goes through, just reinforces some of the points I've talked about: the information reuse, requirements traceability and the benefits, information version management, traceability matrices, test planning, and so forth. As you can see from the analysis above, there are many areas where the introduction of formal requirements management environment can bring and will bring quantifiable improvements to the management of projects. There are many areas where time and money savings would be achieved by the introduction of Visure requirements. Depending on the customer's circumstances, we believe that it is possible to construct a clear and justifiable business case for introducing the requirements tool into the business to achieve what we've outlined above a bit during the presentation. you maintain a complete record of the as-built system rather than the as-specified system, ensuring that all the support documentation reflects the system as delivered. By collating the information as we've described, it provides a summary of the possible savings that could be achieved by the introduction of formal requirements management. The reuse of existing information on known standards and common system requirements provides a consistent foundations for all new projects. This will motivate repeatable processes and support significant improvements in product quality at the same time as reducing time to market. Customer satisfaction also improves because the information becomes more accessible, so you can become more responsive to queries or requests for change. It also avoids omission of information. So if you've been able to reuse information from a previous variant or previous project, things won't get overlooked in the next project, which can often happen and shouldn't happen because the information's there. The use of an integrated design environment or requirements database will provide significant benefits in ensuring full traceability of your customer expectations throughout the design and implementation lifecycle. It allows your most valuable engineering resource to focus on the system design rather than the administration, document production, and performance metrics reporting activities that are normally associated with projects. Visure provides and also encourages more integration across engineering disciplines, where people share common design information but with different viewpoints. As the requirements are directly linked to the physical and functional views of the design solution, the impact of design change can be more quickly and clearly understood. This allows engineers to make informed design decisions. The cost of dealing with missed or errored requirements retrospectively during system integration or beyond has been proven in several Standish reports to be up to 200 times higher than addressing them during the early analysis phases of the project. So that really concludes my presentation today, and hopefully has highlighted areas that where you introduce effective requirements management into your project management environment really can deliver cost and time savings and many other benefits, some of which we can quantify in terms of cost and time savings, and some of it which we cannot. So at this point I will open out the information to ask questions, or if you want to ask any questions or want to raise any questions, then please write your questions now. So I've got one question that's come in so far, and I thank you for that. It says, what does Visure provide over and above that which DAWS functionally gives? So this is obviously, there's very often comparisons between requirements management tools, and there are several areas between Visure requirements and DAWS which clearly are common. Visure requirements certainly covers everything that can be done within DAWS, but actually also covers many things which DAWS does not cover. The idea, the ability to present the schema, or as we call it, the block diagram, that is information available to everyone within the project at any time. And this is really very valuable because it provides some context. If you're working on one document, very often if you're working on a large project, you don't always fully understand the where that document sits in the wider project environment. So having that understanding and making that understanding available to everyone is really important. That is one thing certainly you can't do within the DAWS environment, which you can do in Visure requirements. So are there any other questions? Got another question. How to start with Visure requirements? What is the path to integrate this into the project environment, and how long does it take? So the path to start with Visure requirements, we would normally start with understanding what current processes are you using within your organization. This is something that certainly from my own experience I would recommend. Don't introduce a tool and change your processes at the same time. My view of this is called chaos, or can introduce chaos. My recommendation is look at your existing processes to whatever fashion they have worked for your business up until now. They have worked and you produce products and services by using the processes you've already got. So the first phase would be to understand your existing processes and then apply those existing processes to the tool. Wrap the tool around your existing processes. And that's important because we're introducing one change rather than two changes at the same time. Once we've actually wrapped your existing processes into the tool through a workshop, through understanding what you're currently getting out of your existing processes, we can then start to think about process improvement. Having got the people within your organization familiar with the use of the tool, we can start to then look at the benefits that the tool will bring through process improvement. But doing it one step after another is a controlled way of engaging everyone within your organization and getting buy-in to the use of technology to support your requirements process. And you integrate this. This is part of the integration process of introducing it into your project environment. It says, how long does this take? Well, it depends really on how complex your current processes are. Introducing the tool into the organization can actually take relatively short amount of time, because very often we would try to pre-configure views to certain users so that a level of training that individuals require to contribute to the project is kept to a minimum. So for instance, we would introduce requirements information that you may already have, and we would actually pre-configure a view for a particular user or role which has got that information, and it may have 1 or 2 or 3 empty columns, just like a spreadsheet, where you now want them to make contributions to those columns. So they log into the database and they get that information presented to them, and they would then be required to complete those empty columns with minimal training. So the next question I've got here, what would be the process of porting DAWS modules into Visure? Does Visure capture all of the DAWS data? The answer to both of those questions is yes and yes. First of all, it does capture all of the DAWS data. We have created a very sophisticated integration with DAWS, and it captures the requirements, the links, it can capture the history, it captures all of your users, user information or user group information, and the process is a very straightforward process of exporting the information out of DAWS. We've created a script in DAWS which actually exports all of the information out of DAWS, just like a project archive actually out of DAWS, which can be either done at project level or module level in DAWS. exports it to a file, and that file is compatible with Visure, and we can import that file straight into Visure, which captures all of the information, the requirements, the attributes of the requirements, the links you've established between requirements. It is a very comprehensive integration we've created. So there are 2 minutes left of our allocated time. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to raise before we conclude this? Just for your information, I've added my contact information on the slide presented there, so if you want to contact me directly, please feel free to do so. I'd be happy to talk. Also, we are recording this presentation, so if you want to share this presentation afterwards, we will be sending out a link to the recording so that you can share it with your colleagues share it after the presentation. We will be running this event again later today. If you've got colleagues who would like to join us for that, there is another session at 5 o'clock GMT today of this presentation. So hopefully I've given people that want to ask some questions. We will come back to people that have asked questions. If there are any other questions you want to ask, please send me an email or contact us through the website. We'd be delighted to hear from you. I think the hour is coming up, and I haven't had any more questions. Hopefully I've answered those questions to the satisfaction of the people asking them. And at this point, I'd like to thank you for your time. I know your time is precious, and we've very much enjoyed having your time or company during this session. At that point, I will now finish the webinar, and I hope you have a good day. Okay, bye-bye for now. Bye.